ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to start off this evening's events with a little song. Our group is called SingHERs. My name is Thomasina Petrus.
Gwen Matthews.
A new inductee into the Minnesota Music Hall of Fame. Yes.
And my name is Kathleen Johnson.
And you might be wondering, why are we here tonight? Well, the reason that we finally formed an a cappella group of women, Black women's voices, sharing our emotion, our concern, our joy, is because I was watching the grilling of Ketanji Jackson and saw that photo, that now infamous photo of her daughter watching her. And in that moment, I knew, I'm gonna finally start this group. I'd been thinking about this for years, but that was the moment. And I said to myself, what are you waiting for? And that was the impetus for our very first song, was Ketanji Jackson, now the Honorable. And our first song is called What Are You Waiting For, in honor of her.
What are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, why are you waiting? What are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, why are you waiting?
Little girl in the world, imagining the impossible. She dreams she can, but told she can't. She's made to feel invisible. So she grows, and she knows she will have to do it all her own. But it's okay, she'll make her way, 'cause you won't stop her long. What
are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, why are you waiting? So listen to her song. She thought she waited way too long. Her love was so very strong. This beautiful black pearl, come sing your song.
Encouraging words will be heard from near and far. This powerful girl shall rule the world. Know who you are.
So, little girls in the world, imagining the impossible. Dream you can, know you can, show you right. Now take flight. Are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, what are you waiting for? Tell me, why are you waiting? 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 Tell me, why she didn't wait. No. Are you well? And Oprah Winfrey, are you? She didn't wait. Tell me, why are you? Rosa
Rosa Parks, she did
why.
not. She didn't wait. No. Oh, Rosa Parks, she did not wait. No. I said Rosa Parks.
And what does she say?
Not today. Thank you. This next song is an opportunity for all of us in this crazy, crazy busy world. We've gone through so much. It's a chance for us to center ourselves, and so we came up with a mantra that helps remind us of what all this is for and how important it is. The work that we do in whatever realm we choose to do it in is all about coming back to Mother Nature.
Tears running down like maple from a tree. 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 Mother Nature has a healing remedy. Open your heart and receive. She has always had a plan and strategies. Just listen to her. Feel, see. Tears running down like maple from a tree. 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 Mother Nature has a healing remedy. Open your heart and receive. She's always had a plan never come. Just listen to her. Still believe. Feel, see. Oh, tears running down like maple from a tree. 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 Some may never come. And she has always had a plan and strategy. Time. Just listen to her. Feel, see. Oh, tears running down like maple from a tree. 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 As you see her, as you know her, as you love her, Mother Nature from a tree. Just listen to her. Oh. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good evening. I gotta tell y'all ladies, y'all just totally messed up my entire speech tonight. You really did. And I appreciate that. I really do. If you all could bear with me for a second, my mind goes back to elementary school where I first started to learn these words. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. And the six most important words for me, with liberty and justice for all. Not just for those who may look like me or may not look like me. Not for those who may think like me or just for those who may not think like me. But for all of us. In August of 2005, I found myself on a hot and humid day in South Florida, standing in front of railroad tracks. I tell folks that that day was so hot and humid that I actually seen, this is a true story, a dog chasing a cat and they were both walking. True story. But for quite some time, I was able to actually block out that oppressive heat and humidity because at the moment that I was standing in front of those railroad tracks, I was standing there as a broken man with no hope and no self-esteem. And the main thoughts that was running through my mind was not the oppressive heat and humidity, but whether or not I was going to experience pain when I jumped in front of the oncoming train. Contemplating whether when the train hit me, I'm going to die instantly or would I have to endure moments of agonizing pain as my body was crushed. You see, at that moment, I was homeless, recently released from prison, addicted to crack cocaine, unemployed. The only thing I owned were the clothes on my back. And I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and I was ready to end my life. And so I stood there, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited. So I might be a big guy, but I'm scared of pain. I'm scared of needles. But even the thought of the pain that I may have to endure was not enough to make me move. And so I stood there and I waited. And I waited. And I waited. Thinking of how I was a disappointment to my family, to my friends, being raised in a Christian family. I knew that my parents did not raise me to be in that position that day. But there I was, and I had nowhere else to go. So I waited. I waited. And I waited. But I tell folks today that God had other plans because that train never came. And those railroad tracks were the busiest railroad tracks in Miami-Dade County. It led to the pier, to the port of Miami. And trains come every 5-10 minutes, but that day it didn't come. No matter how long I waited, it didn't come. And so eventually I crossed those tracks. And I walked a couple blocks further, and I was able to check myself into a substance abuse treatment facility. And after completing a 4-month program, I moved into a homeless shelter again. And while there, I decided that I wanted to do something, not save the world. I just wanted to do something to stop the vicious cycle of drug addiction. You know, some of you might know that you would use drugs and they would take you to a very dark place, and you would stop and your life starts to improve, and then something would happen and you would pick up another drink or a drug, and the next thing you know, you're right back where you were, even worse. Over and over and over again, and I was tired of that cycle, and I knew that if I did it one more time, the next time I'm in front of railroad tracks, maybe I wouldn't be as lucky. And so I decided the only thing I could think of really was maybe I should go to school, because my mother always talked about education. And so I enrolled in a local community college, and I ended up graduating at the top of my class, and my professors encouraged me to continue my education. So I pursued a bachelor's degree in public safety management with a concentration in criminal justice. You see, I figured I had a lot of experience getting arrested, a lot of experience appearing before judges, a lot of experience being incarcerated, and maybe somehow those experiences would translate into classroom success. And you know what? It did. And I ended up graduating with highest honors, and before you know it, I was accepted into law school. And in May of 2014, I walked across the stage and received my Juris Doctorate degree from Florida International University College of Law. And so I walk around now with my shoulders thrown back a little bit, because I tell folks I have a dual doctorate degree, Doctor of Law and a Doctor of the Streets. You know, I tell folks sometimes that when I was standing in front of those railroad tracks, if somebody would have told me, Desmond, don't jump. Desmond, don't jump, because, man, in a few years you're gonna meet the President of the United States not once but twice. Desmond, please don't jump, because you're gonna sit on boards with commissioners and mayors, and you're gonna count as your friends state attorneys and judges and all kinds of important officials. Desmond, please, Desmond, don't jump. Don't jump, Desmond, because in a few years, you're going to lead an organization to restore voting rights to 1.4 million returning citizens. Desmond, don't jump, please. If you don't jump, in a few years, you're going to be named one of the 100 most influential people, not in the United States, but in the world. You're going to be named a genius. Desmond, please don't jump. If somebody was there when I was in front of those tracks telling me those things, my first reaction would have been to put them in a chokehold and demand that they take me to that spot where they get those the good dope from, right? Because it got to be that good dope. Back in my days, they call it tension. It's got to be that fire. Because there was no way that you could have convinced me, a person with a record a mile long, a person who's addicted to crack cocaine, a person who is homeless, a person who the only thing he owned was the clothes on his back, a person who was ready to jump in front of a train. There is no way that you could have convinced me that any of that would have happened. But here I am. I'm standing here tonight in front of each and every one of you all as a living example that the word impossible can be repurposed to I'm possible. That anything is possible when, number one, when God is on your side and when you're committed to service, when you're committed to love. I stand here, right, as an example for those of you who may have to overcome obstacles or will have to overcome obstacles or who are currently facing obstacles, that we don't ever have to give up. I'm here as a representative that those people, I remember the people who I used to be. I remember driving by and looking at them thinking that they would never amount to anything. We can't say that anymore. We can't say that about the drug addict. We can't say that about the homeless. We can't say that about the person that's currently incarcerated or the person that's just been released. We cannot say that they don't have anything of substance to offer our community, our state, our country, or even the world. It is such a sweet coincidence that we're in the same theater that they're getting ready to show Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I'm going to tell you why. Two things. I'm going to tell you the first one. When I attended the gala for Time 100, I remember fussing with the Time executives. And I told them, I was like, man, you guys messed up. You guys dropped the ball big time. And they're like, what? What did we do wrong? I was like, you, for that edition of Time 100, they put Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on the cover. And I was like, how the heck you put him on the cover? You should have put me on the cover. Right? And it wasn't because I was conceited. But what I explained to them, right, was the fact that if they would have put me on the cover, anybody looking at that edition would know that you don't have to be a movie star. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a billionaire. You don't even have to be a politician to be one of the 100 most influential people in the world. You don't have to be any of that to have an impact in your community, in your state, in your country. And that was one of the lessons. I already know there's still an embargo. We can't talk about what happened at Wakanda Forever, right? But one of the lessons that I took from Wakanda Forever, right? And that's why, you sisters really messed me up because the song was, "What are you waiting for?" Right? One of the lessons from Wakanda Forever is that the hero that you're looking for is inside of you. It's inside of you. You don't have to wait and rely on anyone for your liberation. You don't have to wait and rely on anyone to create the world that you want to live in. But here's the other important lesson that I took from Wakanda, though. That hero cannot fully materialize within you if you're driven by hate, if you're holding resentments, animosity, or driven by fear. When I was in treatment, I remember I was at my lowest, and I remember watching the funeral of Rosa Parks, the memorial service, when her body laid in state at the rotunda of the Capitol. And it was very significant for me because what I don't tell many people was that after I had crossed those railroad tracks, I had stopped and asked myself what would have happened if I would have died that day. How many people would have come to my funeral? And the answer was zero. I was homeless, on drugs, on the streets. Didn't have any idea. I would have been buried in a pauper's grave. That was a very lonely feeling. And so I created another set of facts. And I said, okay, Desmond, you're killed by the train, and the Miami Herald have your paper, your picture at the front page of the paper. Bold headlines, Desmond killed by train. How many people would come? And I thought long and hard, I only came up with 4 people. And out of those 4 people, maybe 2 would have shed a tear. And I questioned my existence. Like, Desmond, all these years of living on this planet and living all these different places and having these different friendships and relationships, only 4 people will care if you died? Have your life been that insignificant? And I took that question with me, and it stayed in my heart until I seen the memorial service for Rosa Parks. And when I seen so many people walking out of there with tears just streaming down their cheeks, something hit me, and I jumped up screaming at the television. I was like, that's it, that's it. That's what I want. And my mind started racing, and I started planning my own funeral, right? And I'm trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to have this funeral? And I landed on where the Dolphins played, Joe Robbie Stadium. Listen, the idea that I had in my head was eerily similar to what we seen at the memorial service for Kobe and Gigi Bryant. The only difference was mine was a football stadium, and we had chairs on the field. Standing room only, not a dry eye in the house. Because I wanted to feel as if I was significant. That the time that I spent on this planet was worthwhile. And then I ran into a major problem. But Desmond, how are you going to fill a stadium with thousands of people? What are you going to do? And I came up with 2 options. It's going to be an athlete or an actor. Now, the athlete part was a little far-fetched because I was a little older. The knees were a little bad. You know, the Dolphins weren't that good that year. Maybe I would have made the team. But you guys shouldn't laugh. Minnesota had some bad years too now. All right? Not this year, though. Not this year. But the other option was an actor, and I was immediately, like, really discouraged because when I think of actors, like, ladies, when you think of male actors, who's the first name that come to your mind? Denzel Washington. Now, my wife told me I'm a good-looking guy, and I think I'm halfway decent, but I didn't think I was Denzel Washington type of handsome, right? And I tell folks, thank God that I didn't think about Forrest Whitaker, because I know I got him beat. And I probably got Wesley Snipes beat, too, as long as I don't show my abs, because I got a six-pack. I mean, really, I got a keg. He got a six-pack. But I only thought of Denzel Washington. And I was like, man, I am not Denzel Washington type of handsome, so I can't be an actor. And I got depressed. But my mind quickly went back to Rosa Parks. That she what? I said, not today. She did one act to where we, even to this day, we feel the impact of it. And so I quickly thought that maybe, Desmond, if you could take the pain and the suffering and low self-esteem that led you to these railroad tracks, if you could take that and package it in such a way that way you can help others, right? And then they can help others and so on, like that Perk commercial. You know, they tell 2 friends, and those friends tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. That pretty soon when you die, you'll have a stadium full of people that are like, man, Desmond made an impact in my life. And so that's what I decided to do. Even though I didn't know I'd never been an activist or anything like that. I didn't know where to start. But fortunately, while I was still in treatment, during a group therapy session, I said something. And after the therapy session, a young man approached me and told me that whatever it was that I said caused him to experience a paradigm shift. And basically caused him to have a brighter outlook in life or to have hope. And while he was telling me that, something erupted inside of me that I had never in my life felt before. And I could tell you this evening that I was experiencing a joy that I didn't even know existed, yet it was a joy that I was chasing all of my life and didn't even know I was chasing. See, at that moment, I was coming into awareness of what my purpose was on this planet. Why am I here? Why are you here? And it was a very simple answer: to give back. You see, because I looked around at nature, everything that God had created, And I seen that they took a little and they gave a little. And I understood that no matter what my station was in life, no matter how much or how little money I had, no matter what title or I had or didn't have, that there was always someone that's worse off than me that could benefit from my experience, strength, and hope. That in spite of what I've gone through, in spite of where I may be at today, that there is something that I can do to make this world a better place. And so at night, when I was thinking about what I'm going to wear for the next day, I used to throw my shoes under the bed. Thank you for that. Throw my shoes under the bed. So when I get up the next morning and get dressed to go out, I have to get my shoes, which is under the bed, which means I have to get down on my knees to reach under the bed to get my shoes. And since I'm down there on my knees, I might as well have a conversation with my higher power. And the conversation was very simple. First and foremost, I prayed for people who I thought was my enemies, that they would experience the love and comfort that I was experiencing with my relationship with my higher power. Then I prayed for the protection of my family. And then the last thing I prayed for, which took me the longest, was to pray for strength, stamina, wisdom, discernment, and courage to do God's work. And this work was very simple. That every time I step out of my house, to do something to create a better world for everyone. Tonight, I can look any one of you in your eyes right now and tell you that when I was on my knees praying, I was praying for you. I was praying for you because I love you. And you may say, Desmond, how could you say that when you never even met me? I didn't have to meet you because guess what? It didn't matter what you looked like. It didn't matter what your politics was. It didn't matter what your ethnicity was. It didn't matter what your sexual identity was. It didn't matter what your immigration status was. What mattered most was that you was a human being and I connected with your humanity. That is what mattered. And I understood that there cannot be a me without you. I understood that. I also understood that sometimes how we bastardize that word love, right? And how we just throw it around so easily without truly understanding the depth of that word. I remember I used to tell folks that the easiest way for me to define love is wanting for your neighbor what you want for yourself. You see, because if I want liberty and justice for me, then I need to fight for liberty and justice for you. Regardless of what you look like, regardless of what you may think, regardless of whether or not we agree, regardless of whether or not you like it. Love me. You see, it's so easy to say, I love you to someone that confers a benefit to you. It's easy to say, I love you to someone that makes you feel good. Oh, that's easy. That's not the impressive piece. You want to be impressive? Learn how to love someone that hates you. Learn how to love someone that don't agree with you. Because that is the true test of love. That is where the rubber hits the road. You see, and I am not being aspirational. I'm not being the modern version of Don Quixote. I am not. You may think I am, but I'm telling you that my desire, you see, because this democracy piece and this criminal justice piece, right, fits neatly into this much broader piece of liberty and justice for all and loving each other and caring about the humanity in each other. I know it. And it is already inherent in each and every one of us. But we have allowed labels and different types of division to separate us and make us lose sight of each other's humanity. And it's now tribalisms that have taken over our conversations and our emotions. When deep down inside, fighting to get out is our natural desire to love each other in spite of. Desmond, you are crazy. I submit to you that I'm not. Point number one, natural disasters. When a natural disaster hit, how we as a community, as we as a country respond to our neighbors in peril clearly demonstrates that. I know for a fact, Andy, since he's my kindred brother, Andy's driving down the road somewhere in town, and Andy sees someone who's involved in an accident that's laying on the side of the road. Car accident. Guy laid on the side of the road. Andy decides to stop his car and get out. He gets out of his car. He runs up to that person. I guarantee you that Andy's first question to that person is not going to be, did you vote for Donald Trump? It's not going to be, what's your sexual identity? How much money you make? What's your immigration status? Were you ever incarcerated? Are you a violent or nonviolent offender? That's not going to be his questions. His question is going to be, are you okay, or how can I help? It's in moments of calamity and peril that we go to our natural instinct to connect with each other's humanity. And we don't care about those things that divide us on a daily basis. And I believe that we don't have to wait until a natural disaster hit. We don't have to wait until a hurricane. We don't have to wait until a snowstorm. We don't have to wait until an earthquake. We don't have to wait until a condo collapse to show each other the type of dignity and respect that we will want shown to us. And I'm telling you that it is so deep within us that we are even willing to risk our own lives to come to the rescue of someone who we don't even know. We don't know what their political views are. We don't know what their religious views are. But we were willing to put our own life in harm's way for them. It's in us. It's in us. And I think we've shown, even with Amendment 4, where we was able to get such a broad cross-section of people together. We was able to elevate our issue above partisan politics and even implicit racial biases and bring people together along the lines of humanity and have over 5.1 million people say yes to Amendment 4. Over 5.1 million people, 1 million more people than who voted for the governor of our state. Over 1 million people were conservatives, registered Republicans. And I tell people that one of the proudest moments of that night when we won that initiative was the fact that when I looked at those 5.1 million votes, I didn't see 5.1 million votes that was based on hate or fear, but rather 5.1 million votes that was based on love, forgiveness, and redemption. And we showed the state of Florida, we showed the world that love can in fact win the day. And so I believe that if we could learn to look through the lens of love rather than a red lens or a blue lens or a green lens or a black lens or a white lens or a straight lens, but look through the lens of love, we're able to move major issues. We're able to create a world where we don't have to live in fear of our neighbor. We're able to create a society where there truly is liberty, and justice for all. Thank you.
My name's Justin Terrell. I am the executive director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center, and I am proud and thankful for everyone in this room for the fantastic performance. Give it up for SingHER one more time, y'all. Andy, thank you so much for the hard work you and the rest of our board members do every day for this organization. If our board members are in the room, just wave your hand, and if you just give them a round of applause. They have a big job keeping me out of trouble. And to our staff and team, thank you so much for just dealing with me, y'all. But I guarantee, if this is an example of the kind of work we're doing together, we're doing great. And to my friend, Desmond, because I've been in your home, and I remember texting you after you won that initiative. You've been a friend, a mentor, and I'm just so honored to have you here with us today. And I'm excited for this conversation because what you're talking about is so real. Y'all feel what he's talking about? I think people are exhausted, tired of looking at each other through this red-blue lens or this othering lens, and people are hungry for some sense of belonging. And so I'm excited to have a conversation with you right now and just kind of go deeper on some of the topics that you brought up. So let me grab my notes real quick. All right. So I'm gonna stick to the script a little bit, but we'll probably go off script and see what we can cover. And Dr. Cunningham's over here keeping us on time. So, so tell us about the voting rights fight in Florida. You talked about it in your remarks a little bit, but you already know this. But Florida remains, even after your work, remains the nation's disenfranchisement leader in absolute numbers, with over 1.1 million people currently banned from voting, often because they cannot afford to pay court-ordered monetary sanctions. Share about what you have had to do to get people their rights back, and how the state has fought back against your efforts to expand democracy.
That's a loaded question, right? So let me see where I could start, and then the part I missed, make sure you follow up with that again.
I got you, brother.
Okay. So it was, Florida was the worst state in the country as it relates to disenfranchising its own citizens. I think at its height, it was 1.68 million people, all right, American citizens who could not vote because of a previous felony conviction. Now, a lot of times we throw that number around and not really put it in perspective, but that was more people than the population of over 13 U.S. states and territories, right, and over 50 countries in the world, right, and that was a significant number of people. And even like during I think like the 2016 primaries, you had more people who couldn't vote in the state of Florida than the total amount of people that voted in several states, right? And this is what I felt was that, first of all, there's nothing that speaks more to citizenship than being able to vote. And when you strip a person of the right to vote, you basically strip them of their citizenship. And, like I have 4 boys, and, anyone have boys? So you automatically know they're guaranteed to do some boneheaded thing. Guaranteed. And I had 4 of them, so they took turns on me, right? So it was one after another. And when I thought about my boys, and I thought about no matter what they do, they never stop being a me. They never stop being my son, right? And so I thought that there was just something inherently wrong, especially when you allowed, right? Because in Florida, the decision to grant a person's the restoration of a person's rights was in the hands of 4 politicians, and I was like, there's no way in hell that four politicians should have that much power to determine which American citizen get the vote and which American citizen don't get the vote. No matter if they're Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Politics should not play a role in this. Because one of my bigger things is the fact that when you talk about voting, right, let me tell you, it's not as political as people are making it. You know, I voted for the first time, very first presidential election in 2020, ever in my life, and I'm over 50 years old. And let me tell you, that experience that I had when I approached the voting location, I felt like I was walking on hallowed ground because of the blood that was shed for the freedoms in this country, because the blood that was shed so people like me would have the right to vote, right? And then the sacrifices made by the people who helped pass Amendment 4. And so I was walking on hallowed ground, and then when I went and got my ballot and I went into the booth by myself, I felt as if I was engaging in a sacred act, right? And that the level of sacredness, right, was elevated above partisan politics and these the racial biases. That I wasn't voting as a Democrat or a Republican. I wasn't voting as a black person or a straight person, right? That what I was doing was engaging in an act that validated my humanity and my existence within a society. And that is way deeper than whether I voted Democrat or Republican or who the hell I voted for, right? What was most important was that I had an opportunity to have my voice heard in the society in which I live. And that transcends, right, the political, it really does. And so we had to fight, and we said we're going to try to change this. We wanted to take some of that power out of the hands of politicians, and we did so with a constitutional amendment, which Florida is the toughest state in the country to actually pass a ballot initiative, but we did the impossible and passed it, right? And after we passed it, right, remember I said that we won with love, right? And so the problem came, politics came, stuck his hand back in it, right? And, you know, I remember testifying at the Florida legislature. I remember telling them, I was like, man, you guys remind me, right, of this story of you know, this homeless family that was living out there in the elements, rain, sleet, and snow, and you, for over 100 years, you walked right by them and didn't lift a finger to help them. And then the people in the community came together and decided to build those people a home. And the minute they build the home, now here you come wanting to dictate how you furnish a home, right? How dare you, right? How dare you? But that's what happened. And so the one thing I push back against is that it is so easy for us to say, oh, we use these adjectives, right? Republican legislature in Florida pushed back and created these barriers. And that was not necessarily true. It wasn't entirely true. It was the ugly hand of politics, and we've seen it on both sides, that caused these barriers to be put in place than where now people are having to pay outstanding fines and fees. I want to be real. Listen, I'm a lawyer. I sometimes tend to ramble, but I must close with this, is if we limit ourselves to trying to either blame one side or the other, we do the movement a disservice, right? And we limit our ability to actually fix the problem. And the much bigger picture, right? Because let me tell you, one side may be trying to deny me today, but it's another side that was denying me yesterday, and God knows what side is going to deny me tomorrow.
Facts.
So the reality is since the formation of this country, it's always been a select group of politicians who wanted to dictate and pick and choose who get the vote for them. Let's be real. It hasn't been that long since women got the right to vote. And people were so against women having a say in society that they were willing to beat women down in public and throw them in prison, right? And so the bigger issue that we have, and we see it through many, even with gerrymandering and all of that, right, is that it is this political system that has taken over our country and has just contributed to so much of the division, right? Because we have lost our way and stopped being by the people for the people.
So the question was, tell me about the fines and fees.
Well,
I know you want to.
There was legislation that basically said that, yeah, Amendment 4 was good. 1.4 million people now have a pathway. And let me be very clear, right? The legislature or the politicians did not undo the success of Amendment 4. Understand that prior to Amendment 4, the only way a person would ever get their rights restored or be able to vote again if they were to be granted mercy by the governor and his clemency board. That was the only way. You had to grovel at the knees of a politician. What Amendment 4 did was create an alternative pathway to be able to participate in our democracy without having to beg any politician for that. And that's enshrined in our Constitution. All right, and so the only way that they could undo that is by they have to run another constitutional amendment and get the people who voted yes on Amendment 4 to vote to undo Amendment 4. All right, but what they did was they created an obstacle in which people had to pay their outstanding fines and fees. And it's a mess because while they said people had to pay their outstanding fines and fees, they didn't have a system in place to tell people how much they owe. All right, and so we had to do our own research and create our databases and really we raised a ton of money, over $30 million, and we were going around paying people fines and fees because we believe that no American citizen should be forced to choose between putting food on their table and participating in our democracy.
Amen.
I'm gonna tell you. Could I just stick this piece in? Y'all excuse me, I am a lawyer. But when we were campaigning for Amendment 4, I always used to tell people that we were fighting just as hard for that person that wanted to vote for Donald Trump as we were for that person that wished they could have voted for President Barack Obama. Point blank. Because when you're engaging in democracy work, if you're only trying to empower people who you think vote like you, that's not democracy work. That's not. And so when we came with fines and fees, we had encountered a moment where in the dark web, we started seeing that there was possible threats to our organization and threats to me to where I had to get armed guards at my house for 24 hours and armed guards at my place of business. And someone from one of the publications, because within that dark web chatter was some discussion about trying to crash our fines and fees system. And people on the far right was encouraging their folks to apply for fines and fees. And someone asked me, what happens if they do? And my answer was very swift. We would pay them. That in spite of the fact that there were a person out there that may have wanted to kill me, because of whatever politics they may perceive I follow, or maybe because of the color of my skin, it did not stop me from wanting to make sure that that person, that American citizen, if they did their time, guess what? They should have access to the ballot box as well.
Amen. Amen. It's very powerful, brother. $30 million.
30 mil.
Yes, yes. So I'm gonna move on to the next question. So we're an organization that focuses on research in addition to education and policy development. We use these tools to drive meaningful action. So how do you see the role of research in your advocacy work and in voting rights work more broadly? This is from, I'm gonna shout out Dr. Cunningham on this question.
I don't know if I give a doctoral-like answer, Dr. Cunningham, but I think research provides a key connection to the people in the community and what's really happening on the ground. So many times we could sit in our ivory towers and assume. You know, I used to tell folks, for real, I used to love to tell this story that there were people in advocacy that was engaged in what I call social malpractice, right? And I used to explain it by saying that, you know, if you were sick and you went to your doctor, right, and as soon as you walked in to the doctor's office, he's trying to give you a shot or give you some pills to take, you know, you would be a little concerned, right, that doctor is more than likely engaging in medical malpractice because he is administering medicine to you without doing what? Having a conversation with you. He didn't ask you what was wrong. And in spite of the fact that he may have 20 degrees on the wall, right, that none of that matters if he don't have a conversation with you. And so when you talk about research, that is a critical element to really help make a determination of what are the things that are ailing our community or our people. And without research, you're just shooting in the dark. You're engaging in malpractice. And so research is an essential piece. We've used it in such a way to where, I mean, we have connected with returning citizens and their family members in a very profound way that allows us to engage them, allowed us to know what they wanted and what they needed, right? You would think, oh yeah, you know, we go out there and try to tell people, oh yeah, let's go vote, let's expand the vote. But hold up. People got some real life issues going on, and if you're ignoring those things, then you're just engaging in the transaction relationship, right, which gets us nowhere, which contributes to voter apathy today, and you miss out on an opportunity for a transformational encounter. Research helps guide transformational encounters and actually make them more powerful.
Hey, say that. That's a word right there. I mean, because Desmond, I'm an organizer, right, by training. Like, that's my background is social work and organizing. And so coming into a research nonprofit for me, I feel like I'm always trying to make the case for research. But I've always known, right, that it's through, Dr. Cunningham gives me a hard time because I'm like, I'm not a researcher. But organizing is research. Listening to people's problems, understanding what they're dealing with, helping them shape responses and solutions. And that's the work that we try to do. And so I really appreciate you sharing that.
It helps. Other thing it helps do, it helps kick us out of our own echo chambers.
Yes.
And you've seen it throughout this country where you have activists in their own echo chambers and they're believing their message, right? And they're attributing their beliefs or trying to, what they call that, project their beliefs on a community. And the community ain't even there because they have drowned themselves out in that echo chamber. Research brings you back to reality, kicks you out of that. All right, you may feel this way, but let me tell you what the people are really saying.
Yeah,
right?
But it's not just the action of doing the study, right? It's not necessarily the experiment. What I found in the research that we do at the MNJRC, it's about actually listening to people. And sometimes we're so desperate to offer counter narratives to the dominant narrative that has been just so terrible to us, right? Like the story about the 3rd precinct. The story about the 3rd precinct was, for me, they would snatch you up, drop you on the north side, and you had to find your own way home, or worse, they'd bring you down to the river, right? So when the 3rd precinct burns, like that is a counter narrative to the dominant narrative that has been beating our behind. And so it makes sense to scream defund the police in that moment. And we can affirm that.
Oh,
but
you said that.
But when you listen to what people want, what we have found is that people want safe communities. The police are an afterthought.
But isn't
right?
that research though? I mean,
that's the kind of research
that
I'm
is
talking
research.
about. Yes.
Research is listening.
Yes.
Right. Research. Now, when you're forming hypotheses, that's not listening. That's just you thinking, okay, this is what I believe, right? But the research is all about listening, right? Listening to the data, listening to the conversations. That's what research is all about.
Amen. Amen. If anyone wonders why we have it in our name of our organization, and even though it makes it a little bit harder to say, but let's talk about Minnesota. So this is kind of a long question, so bear with me. So in a recent article by one of our research steering committee members, Dr. Chris Ugan, who I believe you know, his team notes that laws in 48 states ban people with felony convictions from voting. In 2022, an estimated 4.6 million Americans, representing 2% of the voting age population, will be ineligible to vote due to these laws or policies, many of which date back to the post-Reconstruction era. You know, don't look where you landed, look where you slipped. You know, this is not brand new. Today in Minnesota, people who are on probation, some of the folks in this room even, for a felony conviction are denied the right to vote until they complete probation. In the case of one of my colleagues, he will not be eligible to vote for 11 years. And many people do, it makes me so mad, brother. And many people do not know that they are eligible to vote after completing probation. In states like Maine and Vermont, if you don't know, people never lose the right to vote. And 11 states continue to deny voting rights to some or all individuals post-sentence, regardless of status. Representative Cedric Frazier, who I don't believe is here tonight, but if he is, shout out, has authored a bill that has received support from the Secretary of State that would allow people to vote regardless of probation status. As a matter of fact, I think, Shane, are you still here? Yes, sir. How many brothers have you been fighting to get the vote back for?
Yeah, well, we just got 57 with their rights restored, but we've been at it for 18 years, and we've got more than we can even put our arms around. However, this brother who's sitting right next to me, Willie Lord, is someone that you're describing now, whose rights are unable to be restored at this current time. We are here to hear our good brother here, Desmond, because we're looking for a way to push Will and others forward to be able to get their rights and be able to share in the humanity you described.
So what you're saying is our people are in the building. Is that what you're saying? All right. So, and Cedric Frazier introduced his bill at Shane's event about a week or so ago. How do you see this opportunity? And please make the case to the lawmakers in the room, because we do got a couple, why they should support this, why they should support bills of this nature.
That's a great question. There are a million reasons. But here's the deal, right? I think that when I look at the motivation for taking away the right to vote, right, it initiated by an attempt to significantly reduce the political capital of the newly freed slaves, right? It was purely a reactive move that was really based on a lot of fear that we're not going to get into right now. But then following that, the move to not restore voting rights fell along racial and political lines, right? And I'm going to tell you why. Because there's no legitimate argument or research that even supports, right, stripping the right to vote away, or even not giving them back if you take them away once a person has served their time, right? There's nothing out there really other than a theory, and those theories are based along political lines, period. And so, for instance, in Florida, right, 150 years, Florida is not trying to change this because, number one, like, okay, there's this assumption that the majority of people are African American, right, and African Americans vote Democrat, right? And so me supporting, if I'm a Republican, supporting voting restoration is going to hurt my party. And so, I'm going to go to this fallback that every politician, Democrat and Republican, go to about being tough on crime and create this narrative that is really an illusion, right? Really a facade, right, to really hide the obvious. The reality is this, right? Even in Florida, we had research that showed that Florida recidivism rate at the time of a particular study that was done was around 33%. And when they looked at individuals whose rights were restored, right, what they saw was a 22-point reduction in the recidivism rate. 22 points.
Wow.
Right? It went from 33.1, and that was being very conservative, to 11.4% recidivism rate. And so just on that alone, it made common sense. It made economic sense, right? It made public safety sense, right, to support restoring people's rights back, because when you look at all the research that's been done, Madam Dr. Researcher, always said that the quicker you help a person reintegrate back into their community, the least likely are to reoffend, which means Florida was spending, now check this out, this was a study that was done with around 30,000 people, right? And the 27,000 that, I think it was 27,000 that did not recidivate, represented over $500 million that the state did not have to spend each year just to, you ready? Just to house them. They didn't even calculate the cost of investigation where they commit another offense, the cost of prosecution where they to get caught, right? Just the cost of housing them was over $500 million. And so being able to reduce that, you're able to now reallocate those $500 million to education or anywhere else you want to reallocate it to, and you're creating a safer community because you're creating opportunities for people to successfully reintegrate and have them have a stake in their community. So it made all kinds of sense in the world. The other thing that we had to let people in Florida understand was the reality was that, because when you think of criminal justice, you close your eyes, you think of an African-American, probably a guy with maybe dreads or gold teeth or whatever. The reality was that the typical person in Florida who could not vote because of a felony conviction looked more like Andy than like me. Really. And so it wasn't now African-Americans were disproportionately impacted, but over 1 million of the 1.68 million were white. There were a whole bunch of Andys, right? And there were a whole bunch of conservative Andys, because I tell folks when I was arrested, the police didn't ask me if I was Democrat or Republican. When the judge sentenced me to whatever, he didn't ask me that either. And so the war on drugs have a significant impact on our carceral system here in the country. And let me tell you, drug addiction don't give a damn about what party you in, right? And we had people on meth, on all kinds of stuff. And so letting folks know that, and that was key in our campaign, was they wasn't just seeing me talking about give me my right to vote back. Man, I had Andy up there with his wife and his baby daughter, right, that was looking so beautiful, and reminding people, wait a minute, it's not an issue about those other people. It's an issue about my people. Because my message, no matter what part of the state I went to, and let me tell you, the most successful part of the states, the counties, where I got the quickest, most support, were all deep conservative counties. Because I asked them a simple question. Y'all ready for this? Do you know anyone who you love who's ever made a mistake? It's that simple.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. And that's important because when I talk about this broader picture about liberty and justice for all, when you see yourself or someone who you love in that situation, your solutions are much different than when you see those people, those criminals. See, when it's your son caught up in the juvenile justice, you want an alternative. But if it's that black kid with the whatever from the bad community, or maybe that the immigrant or whatever, you're not as loving and thoughtful. But when you see yourself or someone who you love there, that is the basis for solutions to our issues.
That's a word, brother. I appreciate you, man. So Minneapolis was ground zero for a global uprising as the world watched the murder of George Floyd. Trigger warning, y'all. Like, real talk. You know this is a tough one for us to talk about. We gonna get through this conversation, though. Florida is where Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman, which launched what we now know as the Black Lives Matter movement. It is fair to say that things have escalated since Trayvon, and George Floyd being the breaking point. At least that's how we experienced it. Mm-hmm. How has Florida responded in the years since the killing of Trayvon? And what do you think the country needs from Minnesotans 2 years after the murder of George Floyd?
I don't know if I'm going to answer your question the way you may expect me to answer it. But you didn't bring me here to answer questions the way you expect.
Tell the truth.
You guys,
Speak your heart.
you guys didn't approve having me here to just answer, right? Am I correct, Mr. Chair? All right, so let me answer. I'm going to answer those questions my way, okay? And then remind me to let me tell you my interpretation of Black Lives Matter. Please remind me that. You asked you've had it in the question, so I could address that. But here's the deal. I think that we have to go back to the power of narrative, right? One of the stories I like to illustrate, and some people it touches people different ways, but I remember reading this book called African Americans and the Atomic Bomb, and it basically was a book that looked at the African American community response to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was prior to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right, the United States engaged in a massive propaganda campaign, right, that dehumanized the Japanese people and desensitized us as to their humanity, right? The caricatures were exaggerated, and basically it was a narrative that was like these, like devils are coming to murder, rape, and pillage our villages and all of this kind of stuff. And how we characterized them, right, was very intentional. And they did such a good job that when the United States dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, rather than there being more outrage of the killings of innocent women and children, it was actually a celebration. That's the power of a narrative. It was the same kind of narrative that said that people like me and you were dangerous, we were violent, we were super predators, we're criminals. The power of a narrative and the power of the word manages to dehumanize us, and desensitize the public as to our own humanity. And so it was okay to put a child in solitary confinement or in conditions that we wouldn't even put an animal.
Come on now.
It was okay for that we were so artful with it that we can cause someone to not care about the plight of her mother and her child by just putting one word in front of immigrant. Just put illegal there, and they're not as human anymore, right? And so that type of narrative, right, made it okay for someone to just put a knee on someone's neck for 8 minutes and however many seconds, and didn't feel like something was wrong because it was a narrative that says that person is dangerous, and it's okay to treat that person like that because that person is not as humane as you are. It's that narrative that says, and we show up because when you see someone, because one of the things that will blow a lot of people's minds, a lot of people that were murdered by police officers, the offense that created the encounter was a misdemeanor offense in an overwhelming majority of these cases. A misdemeanor, something that you get a citation to keep it moving, or if you even bother wasting time with that. And so when you have this narrative that says that, and you see it because get murdered, and the first thing that pops up is this person had a prior criminal history. As if me being incarcerated 5-10 years ago is justification for having a knee on my neck, taking my life. And it's not. It is not. But there is a bigger issue, and when we talked about even the Reconstruction era, about that fear that causes people to think that in order for me to feel safe, I have to make you unsafe. That if you get something, I lose something. That's zero-sum game. And the reality is that it isn't like that. Which leads me to this final thing. I'm an attorney, please forgive me. Like, when I look at Black Lives Matter, this is just Desmond speaking, I think of the body, right? I think of the body. I know that if I'm walking down these stairs and I take the wrong step and I twist my ankle sends, right, a message through the nerves, where? To my brain, and says, uh-oh, something is wrong here, right? When that message goes, trust me, my elbow is not saying, well, I matter too. My arm, my hand is not saying, well, I'm important too. My eyes is not saying, well, no. The entire body responds, right, to that message of desperation, saying that there's something wrong with this body. And so it's that, as an African American, it's something that even Martin Luther King was so ingenious about, is that I know that you've done us wrong. I know that we have a history. But we're still intimately tied because our humanity ties us together. I don't want you to think I'm coming for retribution. I don't want you to think that I hate you and I want to kill you. What I want you to know is that in spite of all of that, I see hope for us to live together and do amazing things. And so understanding as African American that I am part of the body, the collective body of humanity, and that Black Lives Matter is nothing but a twisted ankle that's saying, hey, something is wrong down here. Please pay attention. And we know that if the body ignores that call for help, pretty soon it's going to impact the knee, then it's going to impact the back, and guess what? The whole body breaks down. So it is in the body's interest to collectively react to the call for help, not ridicule it, not try to compete with it, but to recognize it for what it is. And I've twisted my ankle, and guess what? If everything goes into action, because we're one body with liberty and justice for all. One nation under God, indivisible. So don't let my ankle cause all the body parts to go in separate directions, because that benefits no one.
Amen. Amen. Somehow the rest of these questions just don't quite fit anymore. But talk about that though. So like, are we talking about a twisted ankle that's part of a sick body though?
When we talk about Black Lives Matter, we talk about a cry for help. I said, wait a minute. This stuff is going on. We've been suffering this trauma. We've been suffering this pain, right? I look at it more as a cry for help as part of a collective body, right? And what I don't see is the ankle saying, well, I don't want help from you because you're part of my damn problem, because you got too much weight on you, so I don't even want help from you. Or you should have known better. You should have seen that step wasn't that far away. So I don't even want to have a conversation with you. I want to talk about how you messed up, and because of you not seeing this right, now I'm here hurting. We can engage in that, but that thing about the Black Panther, right, Wakanda forever, it tells me, man, that if we want to move beyond, because there's going to be moments that's going to create that anger. There's going to be moments that's going to create that resentment. We're going to see it, but we have to fight through that, right? We have to fight through it, because if we hold on to those, listen, hate is not going to defeat hate, right? Fear is not going to defeat fear. But from what I understand, love conquers all, right? So how do we fight through that? So how do we look at this thing through a different lens, right? Because there is some understanding that needs to happen. Like, man, listen. Can I go a little political? Just a little political?
Don't cost me my C3 status. But.
Okay. No, I'm not going to call you. I'm going to go a little political. Because one of the things I used to talk about, right, because, all right, I got you.
Speak the truth.
I'm going to speak the truth. You know, in Florida, at one point we had like 2 weeks of, do you all have early voting here?
Yeah, we got early
How
voting.
long is early voting?
Looking for my smart people
In
the room.
Florida, it's 2 weeks, right?
It's longer than that.
All right. Wow. All right. So in Florida, it's 2 weeks, right? And in those 2 weeks, you can vote anywhere in your county. You do not have to vote at your precinct, assigned precinct. But on election day, you have to go to your assigned precinct. But you have 2 weeks to vote anywhere in the county that you want to vote. You with me? After President Obama won the election, Florida legislature came out with some legislation that cut back a couple of days out of that, right? That was horrible, wasn't it? Isn't that voter suppression, right? Those darn Republicans, right? Suppressing our vote, right? And the problem was, while there may have been some kind of validity in the argument lost substance, right? Because that same time in New York, you only have 1 day to vote, right? Rain, sleet, or snow, you had 1 day to vote, and it had to be at your precinct. Now, a Republican governor cutting 14 days to 12 days compared to a Democrat governor that only give you 1 day, where's the greater form of voter suppression? And if you're lambasting the Republican Party for cutting it from 14 to 12, but are very silent about the Democrat that only give people 1 day, then the substance of your argument fails, right? And therefore, people sitting on the sideline, you know, you got that coach, you got your son in the Little League, you know, and the coach, you have his son playing on the team, and the coach's son is sorry as hell. But the coach never fussed at his son. He always fussed at your son. At some point, that coach loses some credibility there, right? Because he's not being fair. And so if we're having a discussion about democracy, we can't allow ourselves to just fall into these patterns of just, oh, I'm just going to look at what one side does wrong, and I'm just going to lambast it, and I'm just going to ignore what the other side is doing. A true champion of democracy would fight even harder for people in New York to have at least 12 days. Y'all doing it with 3 weeks. But you can't be silent on one and attack the other. That's counterproductive.
It's really insightful. So I'm gonna ask you a Wakanda Forever question. How are we on time, Katie? Oh, our time's up. Oh. Let me get to. I'm sorry. Thank you. All right. Let's do this. So Adrienne Marie Brown says that all organizing is science fiction. That is, we have to dream about what may seem impossible in order to build a pathway to get there. When it comes to justice, what do you dream about?
You know, there's a couple things, right? It'll be very simple. I dream about getting to a space to where we're able to love the person or the people who we most despise. And I believe that if we can get to a spot to where we can love and see the humanity in people who've been impacted by the justice system, we're capable of loving everyone else. Right? That's what I dream about, and I believe we can get there. I believe that when we're talking about policy decisions, that the people who have the power to create policy and implement policy would place someone who they love the most at the center of that problem to come up with the solutions. And I believe it can happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Desmond Meade.